Hi, good evening. It's been 8 long months and we are live once again. Good to see you all and welcome to this chat show once again with Michelle Gonzalez, your live host and moderator. Hey Samantha, as always, nice to see you. So we have a very special topic today, and that's about architecture. And we have none other than a very renowned architecture, Sharad Kumar from Spaces and People, who's going to join us and give us a live update on what are the current trends, how's retail doing, how's redevelopment going to happen, and lots of other questions that we've been loomed with. We've been having these thoughts over and over again in the last this year, which has been so filled with uncertainty, but despite of which there are many industries that are doing perfectly well and are doing extremely well in terms of their work, and we have Sharad here who's going to give us a little update on that. So good to see all of you. Hi Jayesh. Hey Abhishek, nice to have you. Please be with us. Please be live, and let's see what the expert has to say, and make sure you have your questions in tune. Very shortly we're going to start with this. So I'm just going to warm everybody up and say hello to you as you welcome. Hi, there's Denzel here. Hi. Sure. So I'm going to have him right here with us. Sharad Kumar right here on MySpace with Michelle Gonzalez. Here he comes. Good evening.
Hey Michelle, good evening.
Good evening. Good evening. Just a second.
So tell me.
1 second, yeah. My screen has got it. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Good evening, Sharad.
Great.
Good to see you.
Good evening.
It's
Yes,
been
great to see you again, Michelle. Yes,
absolutely. So it's been 8 long months and we've not heard from the expert.
Can you hear me clearly?
It's a good, I can hear you distinctively. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Michelle, I am a little hard pressed to hear you actually.
Okay, but your video seems to be buffering. Your video seems to be buffering on your side.
Yes.
Okay, in the audience, can you hear us? Please
yes, now
give
I can
us
hear
a
you.
thumbs up. You can.
Now I can hear
Okay,
you.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay. So Sharad, it's been 8 long months. We've not heard from trends about architecture and about things, and we thought, why not ask the expert? Because there's so many people out there who are interested in knowing what's happening with retail, what's happening with development. In fact, I had a whole list of people who WhatsApped me and said, can you please ensure that this video is recorded, because we want to listen to it, because they were all from different fields of architecture. So it's a great thing, Sharad. I'm so glad to have you on my space once again. And we greet you and welcome you. I hope the last 8 months have been good after what we had last spoken. Okay. So I'm going to delve straight into our interview without wasting much ado.
I've lost your audio Sharad, again, Michelle.
Have you? Can you? I can hear you very distinctly. Can you hear me? Can everybody else hear me?
Yeah, I am having difficulty in hearing you.
Can everybody else?
So, my suggestion, Michelle.
Yes. Yes, tell me. What's your suggestion?
I was wondering if you could. Anyway, there's no way of putting the video off on this format, so just trying to save some internet space. That's all. So
Mansi,
anyway,
we can hear. Mansi says we can hear.
Okay, fine, fine. Let's proceed. I was having difficulty in hearing you, but let's proceed. Let's make the best of
Okay,
while the audio is still on.
sure. So
Mhm.
tell us, Sharad, tell us how long have you been a part of this entire gamut of architecture and interior design? What's your tenure?
Well, Michelle, I've been in this profession now for 30 long years. They've I've learned every bit of the way, and I'm still learning. Architecture is one of those professions where you never stop learning, and the more you learn, the more interesting it gets.
Nice. So, 30 long years, you formed a new company which is called?
Yeah, so now I have an entire group of companies. One is called
Okay,
Space and People, which was my
okay,
old brand anyway. I've got another company called Projects and People, which deals with
okay,
projects, and I've got a third company now which deals with societies, which is called
okay.
TSMS. So that deals with the society basically.
I see.
Hello.
So, Sharad, yes, tell us what is this? What has been the? Oh, wow! I mean, I think everyone in the audience can hear us uh, clearly, right? Please just give us a thumbs up if you can hear both of us clearly, because I
So
can hear you very clearly.
yeah, but I can't hear you that well. But let's proceed while we can still hear. So I lost the last question when what you were talking. So
Okay,
can
so
you repeat that
no,
one?
what I was
Yeah.
saying is yes. What is the
Hmm.
paradigm shift in approach that you are seeing it towards development today?
Things have changed in the world of development. The real paradigm shift which has gone into my entire profession of building and development is that quality is now a given. The buyer expects quality, the vendor expects to supply quality, and this is a big shift from the earlier days where chalta hai was the norm. Like ठीक है जो हो गया वो that's all fine, let's make do with it. So make do is no longer an option. So the real paradigm shift is a movement towards quality basically.
So, which was not happening initially, and now everyone's become more
Yes,
conscious that I
yes,
will deliver
absolutely.
what I'm supposed to. Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely, and that goes for the buyer as well as the developer from both sides.
So, sorry, but why was it not happening earlier?
It was not a buyer's market at that point of time. Today, buyers expect those things if they want to commit their money to it. So predominant shift is that it has shifted from a seller's market to a buyer's market. Also, we are moving towards a fast progressing age where we want to be on the same page as the rest of the world. So what with the advent of the mobile and internet, there's a lot of global opening where we are exposed to global benchmarks. So now both the buyer and the developer expect those benchmarks to be there. So that's the reason why this shift is happening actually.
That's interesting. So, what then do you think are the new trends in real estate?
As a market, I think real estate is headed for a short-term boom, which may last from anything from 5 years to 10 years from now. So that's a direct contrarian to what was pre-COVID. So pre-COVID, the real estate market was in a bit of a rut where it was not going anywhere. But I think that's about to change big time. Because first of all, pre-COVID, there was a lot of emphasis on rentals. A lot of corporate people who were getting residences from their companies never really wanted to buy an apartment as such. But now it's a different case altogether. I think every man in India now thinks that he must have an apartment of his own, regardless of whether he's getting one free of cost or not. So it's a very
True.
big shift, and the real. I feel that the home buying is going to be a big feature in this rather than commercial real estate, because commercial estate real estate is going to take a bit of a backbench for a few, maybe a couple of years from now.
But when you say pre-COVID, Sharad, don't you think we're
Yeah.
still in COVID times? I mean,
So yeah, I
yeah,
understand.
because
We are still in COVID times. So that was a reference to our mindset actually. COVID is still
okay,
there, but somehow our perception of COVID has changed. It's no longer a life stopper. So I
yeah,
think the majority of India has changed their perception about COVID and made a blatant move to live with it rather than be afraid of it.
yeah,
So
which is true,
yeah,
which is
yeah, yeah,
a very brave approach. But I've seen in the last 8 months, Sharad, I have
yeah, yeah,
noticed that there has real estate as such hasn't really been affected by COVID because work has still happened. I have seen real estate people still wanting homes, building homes, buying homes, and I didn't see the market drop in terms of the economy, in terms of the pricing of real estate and stuff. So I think
yeah.
it has been very balanced, right? From that
Correct,
perspective.
correct. Yes, yes. So in fact, yesterday I met a developer in Pune who actually sold 350 flats during the eight COVID period, which were the worst. So it didn't affect him at all like that. So yeah.
True. Yeah.
On the contrary, people
Cool. So
on the contrary, people who are dealing only with commercial real estate, they didn't do so well in the COVID era actually. So
uh,
I think it's a bit of both. So
okay. So
mm,
tell me, people know you very well
mm.
in the market in this redevelopment plan. Tell us something. Why is it so difficult that societies don't get their redevelopment plans off the ground? I mean, we as our society in the building that we stay, we've been wanting to go into redevelopment now for the last last 1 or 2 years. But there's been so many hiccups from the developer side, from our side. Sometimes we blame it on COVID and restrictions. Why do you think these redevelopment plans don't get off the ground?
Michelle, redevelopment is more about attitude than it is and strategy than it is about the technicals. So predominantly, three things are what put a redevelopment plan behind, on the back burner. Uh, One is the not seeking professional help before engaging the builder. That's one of the
Okay.
commonest causes of redevelopment plans being put on the backbench. What societies do is they float a tender, maximum take a feasibility report from some architect, float a tender. One builder gives them 35%, another says 40%, another says 50%. They end up going with the 50%. They neither do enough due diligence on what his plans are, nor on what his credentials are, nor on what his plan of action is. So it's so strange that society, I mean, members who are willing to entrust their 2 to 3 crore property and their future to a developer are not willing to spend 15 to 20,000 rupees on doing their due diligence behind that 20 crore property, behind that 2 crore property. So this is one of the main reasons. The problem is that we want to spend no money at all and get the best from the developer, and that best we see only as monetary gain and not as sustainability, not as project completion, not as when I'm going back, getting back into the building. So that's where the key problem lies. That's where most redevelopment plans get stuck. Builder promises anything and doesn't deliver on it, and there are just too many legal things worked into the system for it to be stacked in favor of the society, basically.
But can I cite one example?
Mm-hmm.
For example, like my building is going into redevelopment, and we have hired a PMC, but the
Mm-hmm.
PMC does not support us the way it should, and people are not equipped with enough knowledge to be able to go ahead themselves. So we
Right.
seem to be in a state of a
So
fix here.
So due diligence goes both ways. it goes in appointing the PMC as well. So, like you need a good developer, you also need a good PMC. So, by the way, the term PMC is a little misplaced in the sense that PMC means project management consultant. His role actually comes in after the building starts construction. So, what you need is actually a redevelopment consultant, which is our predominant strength area, wherein we advise the society on how to go about it. Basically, our team of advocates builds all the safeguards into the system to deal with any mishaps with the builder. So let me tell you, builders are not always crooks. Builders have their own reasons and their reservations, which you have to understand and address. So the PM, your consultant has to be aware of all these undercurrents if he is going to work successfully. So most practicing PMCs want only to act as liaison agent for either the society or the developer. So that's where the problem comes in. So appointing the right PMC is important.
You know, Sharad, I wish I had listened to this talk much before we had ever decided to go into redevelopment. But this kind of a thing is very essential for a lot of people who don't understand. You know, a lot of societies, there are people who don't understand what the paraphernalia, what goes behind redeveloping a society. So with little knowledge that you have from the other societies, we kind of put things together. But this is something that we wouldn't have known. So I just hope that this conversation reaches out to a lot more people who are in the pipeline considering this, you know. I mean, this is very helpful, and I hope it reaches out to the right audiences. So tell us, what is your advice going to be to societies who are looking out for redevelopment?
So societies who are looking out for redevelopment, 5-6 things very important. Employ the right professionals before you get into the tendering process. So the right professionals include a good architect. Now this architect needs to be, our approach as architects on this is that we strategize your redevelopment. For example, just a small example, we all know that your maintenance will become threefold once the new building comes in. So how are you going to sustain that threefold? Because the only societies are allowed to invest only in FDs, and FD interest is going down by the day. So how are you going to sustain that maintenance? So we advise the society that don't go for 50% more, 60% more, which the builder is promising you. Keep some area for yourself, maybe a small commercial area, which you can rent out, and that becomes an income for your society.
A lot of people are doing that.
Yes. So we try to make the model sustainable and viable to live in from the point of view of the society owner. At the same time, we try to see that the commercial interests of the builder are preserved. So ideally, appoint a professional beforehand, which is a redevelopment consultant, who has architect and advocate both. And thirdly, appoint a project management consultant who will supervise the execution after the tender has been finalized. So these are three important areas which you need to do. Best thing to do for them is to freeze the plan and the scheme completely before inviting a tender. So that doesn't allow the developer to manipulate your plan and cheese you out of things that he could have given you. Parking, for example. So ensure how many parking are there, viable parking are there in the building beforehand. How many do you need? How many will the new development get? Whether there is any shortage. It's a simple thing, but we need to do it beforehand rather than afterwards.
Perfectly. That's really insightful, Sharad, because I think what we've done for our society is we've got a PMC and not a developer to help us design the plan. You know, we've got the PMC beforehand, we've got a single-handed advocate who does not work with the PMC, then the developer.
Correct.
So now it's become like a whole mess where everyone's saying, why is this not help? Why is the PMC not helping? Why is this not helping? So, you know,
and the advocates also need to have experience in cooperative matters. So the advocates that
Okay.
we are tied up with, all the advocates, there are 2 or 3 who are tied up with us, have got more than 100 or 150 societies on their resume. So that
Ah,
counts, because you know how to deal with every problem which comes with every society.
right. So
Hmm.
now you say a development, you mentioned two words, attitude and strategy. Yeah.
Correct.
So if
Yes.
development is not about technicals, it is about attitude and strategy. How do you help society move in this direction?
Well, simply put, we guide the society first by saying that, see, essentially, let me tell you that most people who are wanting to go for redevelopment need 1 or 2 rooms more than what they have. Essentially, they have no requirement for any more. So, unfortunately, even with that, they will try to get 50% more, 60% more corpus. Their attitude is to try and squeeze the builder for as much as possible, rather than see that what is sustainable. So like, it's not about the figures, it's about what you are getting in terms of long term. So that's how we start. Then we have our advocates build the safeguard into the first the tender that we are floating, then the tender that we are finalizing, then the individual agreements with the member, then the joint construction agreement with the society. All these need very careful vetting. If you leave this to developer, the agreements will be steeped in favor of the developer. So our advocates try to balance both sides, because if it's steeped only in favor of the society, then the developer will not agree. So we try to make it balanced for both sides, basically. So this is an equation where it has to work from both sides. If it works for one side, it's not going to work.
Perfect. No,
Hmm.
I'm really liking where this decision and where this conversation is taking us, Sharat, because this is
Hmm.
the need of the hour, especially in the place
Hmm.
that we live in and the numerous buildings that are going into redevelopment here. I'm sure going to send this video to a lot of our people out here that they're going to benefit from. Thank you for this. Now,
Hmm.
I'm moving on further. As cities are getting very, very saturated, we all know space is getting scarce. Do you see tier 2 and 3 cities becoming the new hotbed for building activity?
Well, Michelle, they already are. I mean, for anybody who has a misconception that tier 2, tier 3 cities are not part of this entire new real estate boom, they're highly mistaken. So quite a number of cities have been granted quite a lot of FSI from the government with the purview of boosting development. That's one part. The second part is that the quality of life in tier 2 and tier 3 cities is actually better than the metros. Now, this is a thing which most of us really do not, who are living in Bombay, do not really perceive. So it's actually better than living here in Mumbai, the quality of life. And like any market, there is a laggard market, right, which is waiting to catch up. And there is a top of the line market. So once the top of the line market is saturated, the laggard market is going to catch up in terms of value. So that's, we are in the age when that is going to happen. The real estate market is already saturated in the big metros. There's hardly any freehold land available, and the onus of real development, that's, we call it greenfield development, is actually in the tier 2 and 3 cities.
So can you give us some examples of tier 2 and 3 cities? Which ones are you hinting at?
Oh, many. I mean, all
Like
over the
Navi
Far East.
Mumbai, like Navi Mumbai,
Uh,
those kind?
Not really. I mean, Navi Mumbai is no longer a tier 2 city, by the way. So it's just a full-fledged city now. So, and Navi Mumbai has its own different problems, which I think it may take the rest of my life to discuss. But uh, what? So let's look at the other cities. For example, in Maharashtra, let's look at say Osmanabad. Let's look at Jalgaon, Dhulia, Kolhapur, Nagpur. Uh, so all these places are in a boom segment, and there's no reason why they should not be. Especially, I think Nagpur, out of Maharashtra, all over the
Lovely.
east. There's a huge all over the east. There's a huge boom. Cities like Bhubaneswar, Cuttack, Guwahati, Newtown in Calcutta are booming actually. In MP, there is Indore, Bhopal. Their markets are all catching up with our mainline markets. So these are great cities to work in.
So what do you think are the pitfalls these cities face in the trend? I think that's okay. I think Sharad's video is buffering. Sharad, did you hear that question? There's a little lag.
Losing you for a bit,
but that's fine. That's fine. That's fine. That's all right. There's a little internet lag, but that's all right. Hi to all you people who are online and who are watching us. Sharad, you're back.
Yes.
I just want to ask you, what do you think? What do you think are the pitfalls these cities face in the trend? In this trend, why this?
So one very big pitfall which almost every city in India faces when they are looking at a development spurt is that the infrastructure does not precede the development. It's the other way around. The development precedes the infrastructure. So that is a very big problem for these cities because development needs to be pre-visualized for it to be really successful. So as a city, they will face the problem that private entrepreneurs are there and developing well way before the infrastructure is ready. So that's a problem all of our cities face. Also, we have this great reluctance to change development laws to suit the times. So that's another area which we have to seriously look at. I mean, there are places which are granted 4 and 5 FSI, and there's no benchmark on how green they are going to be. There's no benchmark on what amount of, I mean, the benchmark which is there for parking spaces is way below what such FSI can support. So these are the road widths where these developments are happening are so narrow that the sheer crowd will just put them out of commission. So these are issues which these cities already face, and they will have to deal with it quickly if they're going to really be successful in their development. So that's one part which I think administrators and the corporations will really have to look at. So legislation has to change in pace with the times, otherwise it can't work.
So what do you think government, is the government helping in these areas, in these matters?
So I think governments are permanently caught between two things. One is providing a consistent environment for development. So we all know that developments extend over a period of 5 years. Now, if I'm going to bring in 5 sets of laws in 5 years, there's not going to be any consistency in any business plan. So that's one constraint that they face. The other side is that quite often these lawmakers have no visualization of what the future is going to bring. So it's very important to look at the final product or final goal that is there in development when you are designing your infrastructure. So you cannot just upgrade. You have to start with a new type of infrastructure altogether. So that's where I think there are these two important pitfalls which governments will face, and they are constantly caught between these two things. The legislation is made by somebody else. The very few technical people on the legislation side, and again, if they change the law every year, what kind of consistency will be there in any business plan?
That's true.
So
we are known for inconsistency in government bodies in any case. So tell
So,
us something, yeah, sorry, say.
yeah, no problem. So so this is a constraint. I don't think it's something which is intentionally done, but governments are permanently caught in trying to balance between everything, right? They don't have to see one thing, they have to see everything in totality. But
Absolutely.
somebody needs to change this attitude big time. So
Yes,
unless we change it, things are not going to improve.
true.
Yeah.
So tell us, if you mentioned that development should also be considered in two-tier and three-tier cities, tell us what are the pitfalls that the developer should avoid while developing such cities? You know, I mean, it's easy. I mean, I know you said Nagpur and Kolhapur and such places, but how can the developer avoid, meeting pitfalls in these cities? I mean, will it sell?
Yeah.
Will this property
Yes.
really sell? You know?
Yes. So again, it's a very, very good question. Very good question, Michelle, because see, we have all these constraints, right, regarding the laws or whatever, whether they are consistent, inconsistent, right, wrong. So what we encourage our developers to do is first strategize the development of your property properly. What are the objectives that you want to bring in to sell your property? I mean, you want to provide convenience, you want to provide green spaces, you want to provide amenities. What is that strategy that will bring in your buyer? So that generally most developers have the pulse of things as far as that is concerned. So they exactly know what is going to draw in their buyers. Okay, that's one part. Once this thing is out of the way, then we ask them to adopt universal practices. So practices which may stand water in any part of the world. Suppose you're building a basement, then you must build a basement which is universally acceptable. Suppose you are building electricals, then you must build electricals which are universally acceptable. And you must plan your development for 10 years in the future. So suppose you're making a largish development, then you will spend about 3 to 4 years in completing that development, another couple of years in just selling and getting out of it completely. So if have a 6 year window of getting out of the project, then obviously your property must be designed for 10 years forward, because otherwise your buyers will not give you that word of mouth reference which is required to build your reputation. So three things important: accept universal practices as far as construction is concerned, universal benchmarks for design, and strategize your development properly. What do you need in your development? Do you need a mall, or do you need a shopping center? Do you need a club? Do you need a gymnasium? What is it that your buyer is looking for?
So ask you a little off.
Part very, very well.
Okay.
Hmm.
I wanted to ask you a question. Nowadays, there have been like so many new developers that have sprung from nowhere. You know, I mean, you see so many different developers, so many buildings, so many constructions coming all over the place. I mean,
Hmm.
how easy or difficult it is for a lay person to choose the right developer?
Extremely difficult. Extremely difficult. Because see, developers have to be chosen in 3 or 4 tiers if you want to go for redevelopment. First is we call it the capabilities section. Capabilities section involves scrutiny of his financial records and his financial track record. Now, second part of capabilities is his legal track record. I mean, how does he has he met with all the compliances required in his previous projects? The second is the commercial section, wherein he will give his commercial bid for the property. So the technical, the commercial, and the capabilities section have all to be reviewed and marked and evaluated like a judge's scorecard for that matter. And we do that part before we assign a developer to any society. Uh, Particularly, the numerous developers you are talking about, they are there for smaller properties. So now there is a huge amount of properties in Mumbai which are below 1,000 square meter in terms of their plot area. So
Mm-hmm.
invariably, the small time developer is going to look for these properties. And this is where the members also have the least financial commitment to making the redevelopment work properly. So we
Mm-hmm.
advise these kind of plots to go with the self redevelopment model, wherein they can redevelop themselves. So that is, I think, is going to be the need and
Next.
the yeah, it's going to be the next step for development in Mumbai.
But do you
Society
think
is
this is going
redeveloping
to be,
themselves.
is it going to be successful, this redeveloping themselves?
It will be. It will be, because what happens is, see, what the problem is that whenever something new comes across, when you come across something new, there's an initial reluctance to see whether somebody else has done it successfully or not. And the first successful models of self redevelopment are now just springing up in the city. And I don't know if you really know that government has also liberalized scheme of things. Previously, there was only one bank which was allowed to finance self redevelopment, and now there are
Mm-hmm.
numerous banks which are allowed to finance self redevelopment. And this processes as it evolves, as people come across new hurdles, new means will be sought to cover them. Self redevelopment is actually pretty easy as long as the society members put their mind to it, and they have the right people guiding them. Importantly.
True. That's great. Okay,
Hmm.
so tell us, we all know that greater development invariably ends up making a dent in our effort to preserve environment. Do you have any
Yes.
idea on how development can be both green before building and after occupation?
Yes, definitely. I have worked on many models wherein we can make a standalone development much greener, and a larger green model, which kind of looks into zero emission, making your place a zero emission city, which reduces the quality of life that we lead is defined by three fundamental factors: the quality of the food we eat, the quality of the air we breathe, and the quality of the water we drink. Lastly, the quality of the space that we are living in. Now, the last one actually governs the first three, actually, in our case. So, what we try to do is that we try to make models which are zero emission. We try to make models where the farm to table time and farm to table cost is minimized on food products. We try to make sustainable models where water is conserved. In fact, we have a very nice rainwater harvesting person who's constantly working with us, rainwater harvesting consultant who's constantly working with us on these projects. So we try to do these three things, and that will ultimately make the best of things. So if Michelle had to only cycle or walk to work instead of stepping in an auto rickshaw, wouldn't it be great? Or only walk to shop, it would be great. And if the public transport was sufficient, zero emission transport system was in place which was efficient enough, you wouldn't need anything else. So we do have models for visualized for larger developments which involve many kilometers, wherein we try to put these ideas across to our developers, and then of course depending on whatever their perspective is, they would tend to either take or reject or use part of them, whichever.
So when you said farm to table, how do
Hmm.
you go about doing something like that?
Very simple. So, for example, if you have say a patch of land which is 20 kilometers by 20 kilometers, say. So, if you introduce five patches in it which are 5 kilometer by 5 kilometer, which are meant only for cultivation of produce or dairy, uh, it would not make any difference. I mean, the density of the entire settlement could still be managed with the other patches. So it's about land planning overall. How do land use plan basically?
But is
How do you
this
plan your
feasible
land
in a
use?
metro city like
Yes.
Mumbai?
So, like I said, these are not feasible in retrospective models. This
Ah,
level of green commitment is not possible in metros which are already built. This would have to be done on virgin land wherever it's possible. And then we try to introduce many other ideas. For example, walkways which are covered with solar panels, for example. So you have a walkway, you need shade on the walkway, but at the same time, it's an area which is generating power and helping you ease the power burden. A small thing. We have automation across the complex, which will automatically switch on the sense the level of light and switch on the light, and
the
which
sense.
automatically, yes, the automation. So that's efficiency, governing the efficiency of your lights. Maybe have sensor lights. We also try to reduce manpower input into our development. For example, now we are using FASTag everywhere, right? But it's just equally efficient to adopt that policy for your own basements and your own parking areas and your own entry points. So X gate, you will not need that many personnel as you would require otherwise, basically. So these are three areas: reduce manpower, reduce energy consumption, use sustainable materials, more natural light, and try to reduce emission as much as possible, basically.
Nice.
Mm.
Yeah, that's a promising factor. But only if
Mm.
people started believing in the two-tier cities and started really looking for a habitat like that, because
Yeah.
we've grown up here and lived our lives in Mumbai, we just feel this is home. So even
Yes.
getting out of this comfort zone. I mean, I no longer could call it a comfort zone. Mumbai being such a big metropolis
Yeah.
right now, and
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
kind of noise and work, and it's just
Yeah.
making us feel now that we should just pack our bags and leave and move to a much more
Exactly.
quieter
Exactly.
place. You know, this is
Exactly.
what this is what a
And the
lot of
only answer we have for Mumbai is more FSI. So which is not really the answer. So everywhere you go, you have more FSI. More FSI is just complicating the problem. So
true.
yeah. So for sure, I mean, Mumbai's problems, who doesn't know? But it's our
Absolutely.
reluctance to change which doesn't let us go outside from here.
Yes.
Hmm.
So tell us, you're working all across India. Now, how do you help a developer in, say, in these two-tier cities, say, for example, Nagpur or Raipur or Indore, who wants to have a sizable development?
Exactly those three same principles.
That
Strategize
you
first.
mentioned?
Strategize. Yes, strategize. Have a good business plan. So quite often, builders in small tier cities start without a business plan.
Mhm.
So they actually don't know what is the cost they are going to incur, nor do they know what is the final value they are going to get. It's just guesswork. So we tell them to have a business plan and put the costs for all the factors, all the amenities they are building into it. So that's then of course strategizing the use of the land that they have in, and then just adopting the right benchmarks. Um, we also sometimes help them getting the right managers for their sales from our network. So that's really not our core strength. That's not something we are involved in. But we know a lot of these managers who will manage sales in the right way. Or suppose if you're wanting to build a mall, then uh, he will do the right things for the entire lease, basically. So they are called sales consultants or development consultants. They call themselves sometimes, but we help them with those as well who are in our network.
So, Sharad, tell us some of your successful development, places that you have uh, successfully developed over the, I mean, in Bombay or in other cities. Which are some of these that you would like to discuss?
So anyway, I'm not sure whether naming names is the right thing on this forum, but we've had development in Pune, development in Mumbai, of course, redevelopment in Mumbai. We have done some in Indore. We have done some in Pune as well. So many cities, and just looking to basically help whoever else wants to get in.
I see.
Hmm.
So overall, right now in this, like when we began our conversation, we spoke about being in the COVID, scenario today. Redevelopment is doing very well, and
Yes,
people are going for redevelopment. In fact, government has also lifted all that redevelopment has to continue like the way
correct.
there are no impediments or obstacles put in this way. So tell us, is there going to be any benefit for the buyer? Is the real estate market going to come down, or is it always going to be on the high rise? I mean, we've not seen a drop in years. In years, the development has. I mean, how does a buyer have the propensity to spend over 1 crore on like a one-bedroom flat, which is just not seeming to go down? What happens to that? I mean, are the incomes the salaries do not increase, but real estate never reduces. What is your take on that?
Well, one take is very simple. First of all, real estate never reduces. Till date happens only in Mumbai. It doesn't happen in most other areas of India. There are areas where real estate has gone for a reduction in cost. I mean, reduction in price. And so, honestly, the main important thing here is perception. See, it's whether you want to sell at a particular price. Three things happen. Let's look at what our law is doing to this. Okay. So, our law says that if you're buying a property and if you're selling it, you have to buy another property. Okay. So, unless you buy another property, you have to pay something which is called capital gains tax. Okay, now what happens is that I bought a property X number of years back. Say I bought it for 35 lakhs, it become 1 crore today, and I want to sell it. But if I don't buy another property, then I'll have to pay 20% tax on my gains to the government. So by default, property buying encourages property buying in our country. Okay, so now if I have to buy another piece of property which is worth 1 crore, would I really be able to sell my existing property way below that price? So that's one of the areas where the price gets reinforced one by one. Second thing is the ready reckoner rate. So the ready reckoner rate, I have not seen it. I have seen it go down only once in my so long stint. The ready reckoner rate is the minimum rate government defined by the government for the value of a property. So essentially, if the ready reckoner rate doesn't go down, and if you are selling below the ready reckoner rate, you are still paying more stamp duty. So chances are you will not sell below that. So these are reinforcements built into the law of the land which support property price. But to tell you the truth, it's a myth that property prices don't reduce. So quite often because of this, people may not sell at lower price, but they are caught in a lot of distress with their property investments. This is the reason why you find so many developers go bust, or so many individual investors who are invested in real estate go for a toss for a long stint of time, because they can't manage to sell that product. If they sell their product at a lower price, it is just not viable for them. It's that simple. So I think that's the area where real estate prices are self-supportive. But we are getting into the age where real estate prices will be driven by real-time markets. And that place will come, right? Government is moving towards that open market theory, wherein everything will be driven by demand and supply. And real estate will go towards the same thing eventually. And some of these laws which are in place will eventually change to accommodate this market practice. So I think that's where this price thing comes in. But it's not really true that prices don't go down. I mean, so they do go down. But yeah,
Yeah, and help buyers like us invest more, and developers like you to develop something really nice for people where the supply is great. So
uh,
Sharad, I think you've given us a nice comprehensive gist on this topic of redevelopment per se, because there's so much that we need to learn and we need to know. I like the way you have encapsulated the whole thing for us. You know what happens is, like I earlier said, we as a society, I live here in Malad or Lem, and it's a place that I think every building here I know is going into redevelopment. Every society needs a lot of understanding on what are the strategies you need to keep in place, and we
correct,
were all involved in these meetings when we knew nothing about it.
correct,
Unfortunately, the secretaries and the chairpersons are senior citizens who themselves have very less knowledge on all these areas, and just by hearsay and things like that, they've been
yeah. Basically, most societies do that. You see, their members go around by instinct rather than by knowledge.
true,
Uh,
true.
uh, yeah. So somehow, with the complicated scene of redevelopment and development in, especially in Mumbai, that's really not the right place to be. And invariably it comes from. We of course talk about secretaries and chairmen everywhere, right? But the fact is their hands are tied by the attitude of their members. So what
Absolutely.
when we try to go to a society, we try to enlighten everybody together. So I'm not saying enlighten as in like I am some great Buddha, but uh, the fact is that if everybody doesn't have the same perspective and they're not on the same page, then this exercise is very difficult. So we
No, no,
try to
it's
tell them as well, okay, Baba, this is, I mean, you better get into the groove, employ the right professionals. Of course, we know that you'll have to spend money to engage those professionals, but that money is going to safeguard your future, and see that your development is over in record time. You're actually going to get displaced from your home, and if you
yes.
cannot move back in, which is half the cases in Mumbai, if you cannot move back in, then you're stuck in the middle of things. So that's
So
where
that
we come from. Yeah.
Yes. So I think what we've learned and our takeaway from this topic has been what societies need to understand before they even consider going into redevelopment, the attitude,
Exactly,
the
exactly,
strategy, and all these various factors that you've emphasized on. Um,
exactly.
Sharad, would you like to cap up this discussion in a few sentences? We are almost reaching time. We'd like to take questions in case anybody here has a question for Sharad. If you can please pin it down here in our comment section. In the meanwhile, Sharad, would you like to say something to cap up this discussion?
Well, to cap up this discussion, I would like to say is that one thing I would like to say is why we are holding this discussion at all. So recently, I have been going to numerous societies in Mumbai. Now, all of a sudden, because developmental activity has been at a standstill for almost 12, 13 months, everybody wants to get it done and over with. And in their hurry and enthusiasm and lack of knowledge about all these matters, they're taking steps which are detrimental, disastrous, at least short term. So all these things do happen. So I've attended a lot of these meetings recently, and I think I needed to put it out there. So that was one area why we are holding this discussion. Another area we are holding this discussion for is that I'm now seeing a lot of traction in our business in the tier 2 and tier 3 cities currently. And I'm not liking what's happening over there. So I'm not liking how people are handling their developments. I'm not liking their short-minded approach to what they want to do with their projects. I'm not liking their the extent of their green perception of these projects. So that also needs to change, because by the time you finish your project and you are in the market and done and dusted with it, the world is going to move on. So all of a sudden, just as you have completed and just about to sell your project, you will find out that you are behind the rest of the world. So that's not a place where you want to be. And thirdly, that this I think people in Bombay feel the pain of pollution and environmental loss, I think, more than anybody in this country. The loss of environment and livable habitat, I think we Mumbaikars feel the pain of it more than anybody else. So I want to really tell these people through this discussions that it's time you change your perception on this. And it doesn't cost too much. What you lose in cost, you actually gain in value from your customers. So if you intend to be in the development business for a substantial amount of time, then you have to have this perspective. Otherwise, you can't really expect to be in this business for long. Now, with the current quality initiatives which the buyers are demanding, it will not happen. So what happens is the tier 2 cities tend to emulate what Mumbai and Delhi and Pune are doing. And then they fall flat on their face, because we all know that Mumbai development pattern is not great anyway. So this is where I would like to really help them, so to say. Don't follow the metro blindly. Go to the next level and try to better them, is where I would like to go.
I think you have really given us very, very valuable insight today, Sharad. Honestly, what you've spoken, I see that you have understood the need of what is happening around, and you've been able to facilitate it through this discussion today. I, as a layperson in this area of redevelopment, I have gained much from it, because I know that we are currently in a redevelopment mode in our society, and I can completely relate to what you've been saying. In fact, I'm going to take this video and I'm going to share it with the members of our society today. And yeah, I'm just going to feel that this is like a godsend thing, because we are in the midst of
Yes,
finalizing a
yes,
plan and not understanding why is the PMC helping and why is this not happening. And here in the lap of all of it falls this discussion, which enlightens us on, what we are missing on. So I just
yes,
feel
exactly.
this has been very fruitful. Sharad, I think you've really capped it beautifully for us. Thank you for sharing this thought and idea with all our viewers, and for coming on this space. We are almost nearing an hour of our discussion. I think we've had a great, fruitful conversation. Friends, all of you who've been listening, this is Sharad Kumar, MD Spaces and People, and he's very insightful, and like he said, an owner of 3 companies over the last 30 years, has done incredibly well, has great knowledge on how to make sure that your redeveloped space or your property is taken to the level that it needs to be. So please stay tuned, get to know a little more about Sharad and his company, and let's hope that we can all work together in making this a beautiful planet with your fantastic ideas of the greener spaces that you've been envisaging for a city like ours. So thank you
Right.
very much, Sharad. Thank you everybody for listening, and stay tuned. We'll come up with very interesting topics once again.
Pleasure,
Thank you,
pleasure,
Sharad.
Michelle. Pleasure as always being with you here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, people. See you
See
until we
you.
meet again.
Bye.
Bye.
Yes. Exactly. Bye.